Welcome to Mastering the Gut, Module 2, Altered Structure Causes Altered Function. A Category 2 distortion pattern involves the weight-bearing and anti-gravity structures of the body. These structures allow for activities of daily living. An example of this includes movement and exercise, etc., and the suspension of organs allowing for proper metabolic function, reproduction, etc. The majority of the muscles and fascia of the body are oriented vertically in the movement compartments. There are, however, 4 major horizontal planes in the body that are oriented in a more of a crosswise or transverse plane, in addition to several minor planes, i.e. knees, ankles, elbows, wrists. The 4 major transverse planes are extremely dense. These major planes are called the pelvic bowl, the respiratory diaphragm, the thoracic inlet, and the cranial base. This creates separation into different compartments: the cranial, oropharyngeal, thoracic, abdominal, and movement compartments. Frequently, all of the transverse planes will become warped and restricted when a Category 2 distortion occurs, resulting in the deformation of the contents in these different compartments. This is because the planes are all interconnected through muscles and fascia. Compensatory muscle irradiation from the primary Category 2 lesion will result in muscle contractures to resist distortion throughout the body. The muscles involved in Category 2 muscle irradiation cross at least one of the transverse fascial planes. Altered structure causes altered function. Altered function causes altered structure. Altered function controls altered structure. Muscles and the nerves stimulating the muscle irradiation require oxygen, glucose, and nutrients to maintain contractions, while at the same time elimination of metabolic waste, carbon dioxide, and lactic acid is necessary. The movement of these essential elements, oxygen and nutrition, and the elimination of metabolic waste, carbon dioxide, and other toxic elements, is carried out and controlled by the vasomotor system and the NEI supersystem. This must occur through the vasomotor control of and through the blood supply. Various symptoms, seemingly unrelated, can be connected when the polarizing lens of philosophy-based anatomy, physiology, and neurology is removed and viewed in terms of the working laws of health. The autonomic balance of the compartments oscillates between active and inactive periods. A person with a good vital reserve will be able to compensate until the primary lesion is corrected either naturally or through chiropractic or nutritional support. However, parts of the body do not act in isolation, and these muscle irradiations restrict blood flow and impair nerve transmission as they pass through to other compartments of the body. Other areas of the body in turn will start to suffer and become tied to the original source. A person with an active Category 2 lesion will produce constant stimulation to maintain compensatory contractions and adhesion formation. The cranial and abdominal brains need to interpret the general needs of the different parts of the body in a selective manner. The sympathetic nervous system directs blood to the skeletal parts of the body by selectively constricting blood vessels. During physical activity, the movement compartment, or the skeletal compartment, requires blood, while the digestive organ slows. The opposite holds for the inactive period. Thus, blood vessels in these different regions receive different autonomic signals depending on the time of day and the interpreted signals. The increased demand for the metabolic needs and diminishing reserves for maintaining these muscle contractions signal the viscera to become active to fulfill their requirements. The autonomic balance of these compartments oscillates. This results in an unbalanced autonomic output developing in the Category 2 body with increased parasympathetic dominance in the visceral or abdominal compartment and increased sympathetic tone in the thoracic and skeletal compartments. The neurotransmitters responsible for inhibiting and restoring balance to the autonomic and movement nervous systems are soon depleted. Essentially, the brakes are gone, and any stimulation, no matter how small, can run out of control. After the primary lesion, everything the body does is defensive in nature, and that defense mechanism will continue to compensate until the primary lesion is corrected or the compensation fails. As the compensation fails, another tier of compensation will occur. A person with a depleted vital reserve will not be able to meet the demands. A loss of vasomotor control will result in hyperemia in some parts of the body and ischemia in others. A muscle contraction maintained over a period of time will result in muscular ischemia. When combined with the vasomotor ischemia, will result in the onset of adhesion formation. Ischemia, or low blood supply and oxygen, has been thought to be the most important insult that leads to adhesion development. Furthermore, a deficient or suppressed or overwhelmed immune system is an underlying mechanism in adhesion development. Lactic acid and hypercapnia, excess carbon dioxide, leads to misinterpretation by the abdominal and cranial brain. Lactic acid impacts the blood flow and the nervous system within the muscle. The hypercapnic nerve gives a weakened signal that is interpreted by the brain as an over-relaxed muscle. The tighten up signal then further cramps the muscle, producing more lactic acid and locking the muscle into a spasm or contracture and the formation of adhesions. This restriction in one region can put a drag on the fascia in any other direction, including crossing the transverse fascial planes, promoting additional adhesion formation. Adhesions may occur on the surface of our organs and muscles or deep within them. This may create more irritation and set up a cycle which increases the formation of adhesions that will persist long after the original trauma has healed. Adhesions often join structures from different body systems with strong glue-like bonds that can last a lifetime. Some adhesions produce dense three-dimensional matrices. Forces applied to the adhesions alters the biochemistry of this three-dimensional matrix adhesion, and these adhesions sense and react to physical stress that enhances their three-dimensionality and rigidity. Adhesions may attach to organs, nerves, muscles, and other structures, restricting movement and creating blockages and pain. They can join any structure in the body to its neighbor or to a distant structure, causing confusing symptoms of pain or dysfunction. Adhesions can cause a decreased range of motions as well as affect the speed and quality of these movements and nerve transmissions. The extracellular matrix of skeletal muscle, ligaments, and tendons are composed of different types of collagen molecules that play important roles in the transmission of forces throughout the body and in the repair and regeneration of injured tissues. The ability to break down and synthesize new collagen molecules is tightly controlled and in an organized fashion is critical to maintain optimized force transmission. Matrix metalproteinases are zinc-dependent endopeptidases that digest collagen and other structural molecules, while MMPs are required for baseline extracellular homeostasis. Injury or disease can dysregulate MMP activity, which can lead to alterations in normal extracellular matrix architecture and disruption in normal force transmission. Inflammation is a common trigger for the induction of MMPs and activation of MMP enzymes. Chronic inflammation leads to persistent increases in MMP activity, leading to disrupted extracellular matrix ultrastructure and tissue function. MMP gene generation is regulated by various cytokines and signaling molecules, including TGF-beta, IL-1B, and TNF-alpha. Adaptation of tendon extracellular matrix to mechanical loading follows a similar pattern seen in muscle extracellular matrix. While there are similarities between muscle and tendons in the biological mechanisms of extracellular matrix adaptation, muscle injuries are often responsive to rehabilitation and other conservative treatments, whereas chronic tendon injuries generally have a slower rate of healing and appear to have a poorer clinical outcome than muscles. A pathological accumulation of collagen occurs in many different types of musculoskeletal disease states, in which the balance between collagen production and degradation becomes dysregulated. This failure in extracellular matrix homeostasis can be distilled down to one of three proposed mechanisms: overproduction of collagens, failure to break down damaged extracellular matrix, and improper reorganization of complex supramolecular collagen networks. A frequent observation in many musculoskeletal injury and disease states is an upregulation of MMP and disordered collagen expression. MMP-mediated degradation of network collagens impairs the ability of fibroblasts to properly sense force transmission through the extracellular matrix, disrupting their potential to respond to mechanical loading, and leads to failure of fibroblasts to repair sites of injury. Inflammation degrades and inhibits the formation of the three main structural components of the body: collagen, elastin, and protoglycans. Exogenous stress from activity or endogenous stress enhances the degradation of the connective tissue. A major factor frequently overlooked is gas in the bowels from bacterial fermentation. Bowel gas is increased when the body's ability to eliminate it is compromised by the psoas diaphragmatic contracture, restriction of the respiratory excursion. In addition to this, bowel gas production is increased with dysbiosis from bacterial fermentation, which also increases the inflammation within the body, further degrading the connective tissue health. For bowel gas to become visible on an X-ray, it must reach a pressure of 1 atmosphere or 14.7 psi. That's half a car tire. The pressure is constant and never tiring, while connective tissue and muscles require rest, proper circulation, and controlled inflammation to repair. This constant circumferential outward pressure within the pelvic bowl serves to unseat the interdigitated grooves of the sacroiliac joint. This creates pelvic instability and increased inflammation, attempting to repair the connective tissue degradation. When a sacroiliac joint is degraded due to inflammation, the ligament is overstretched due to the combined effect of the exogenous activities of daily living and the endogenous bowel gas pressure. It is then said that the patient has a right or left sacroiliac joint sprain, though both sides are often affected. Inflammation also causes fluid to build up between the sacrum and the ilium in the joint space, creating further separation, preventing the realignment of the joint interdigitations. There are also many nerve endings called joint receptors or proprioceptors that are extremely sensitive to pressure, stretch, movement, and non-movement relative to the weight distribution. So much so, a relatively mild sacroiliac sprain can be very painful. Proprioception is related to the limitations in the functional ability, and altered proprioception stimulates an altered compensatory response. Muscle fibers of the diaphragm are contiguous with the fibers of the psoas muscle. Anatomists cannot determine where the fibers of one ends and the other begins. However, many make guesstimates, which is then taught to healthcare providers. A compensatory contracture of the psoas diaphragmatic muscle complex occurs in response to inflammation-induced connective tissue degradation of the sacroiliac ligaments and altered proprioception. This compensatory contraction causes a Category 2 visceral distortion where organs lose their motility, which is their ability to move spontaneously and actively as needed, their motility, which is impairing their ability to be mobile and to maintain their position in the abdomen. This constriction of the organs impairs glands from expanding as NEI supersystem components are produced. There is impaired peristalsis, which is the wave-like movement that must occur from the oropharynx to the rectum, allowing the gastrointestinal tract to push food particles towards the anus. Impaired mixing, which is the mixing motion that occurs from the oral cavity and the stomach that allows the digestive tract to repeatedly break down food into smaller particles using mechanical digestion. There is impaired segmentation in regions of the small intestine, restricting the contracting and relaxing of the small intestine, disrupting digestion and absorption. Impaired mobility and motility results in the congestion of metabolic toxins accumulating in the body. Impaired elimination of metabolic waste, resulting in the accumulation in the vasodilated lymphatic and portal systems surrounding the organ with the weakest vasomotor control. Everything the body does is defensive in nature. There are no muscles that cross or act directly on the sacroiliac joints. This allows for proprioceptive monitoring of the body's center of gravity located at the second sacral level. Therapies and treatments to strengthen surrounding muscles or increase sacroiliac joint mobility aggravates the degradation of the connective tissue already occurring from inflammation and endogenous bowel gas pressure. Studies have shown reduced motion of the sacroiliac joints results in increased spinal ranges of motion, while conversely, studies have also shown that increased motion of the pelvis results in decreased spinal ranges of motion. A sacroiliac lesion stimulates the proprioceptors to initiate a compensatory psoas diaphragmatic complex contracture to stabilize the pelvis. The greater the sacroiliac joint lesion, the greater the psoas diaphragmatic contracture. Sacroiliac instability results in increased proprioceptive firing, which is further stimulated by physical activity or sacroiliac joint movement and pressure. The domino effect of this is the abdominal viscera being compressed and torqued, the thoracic viscera are stretched, there's reduced breathing ability or exercise-induced asthma, the pericardial sac is stretched and compressed, resulting in reduced cardiac output with an increase in the heart rate to compensate for the smaller stroke volume. Foundational instability of the pelvis causes a Category 2 visceral distortion dysfunction. This affects all transverse fascial planes in the body. The diaphragm is the only muscle to cross the body in the horizontal plane, while the psoas diaphragm muscle complex crosses and participates in two horizontal planes of the abdominal and thoracic compartments. Contracture of the psoas diaphragm complex compresses organs and soft tissues below the diaphragm and above the pelvic bowl, and it stretches the organs and soft tissues above the diaphragm below the thoracic apex. The heart is encased in the pericardial sac. The pericardial sac is intimately attached to the central tendon of the diaphragm. Cardiac function is assisted by normal respiratory movement of the diaphragm. Psoas diaphragmatic contracture distresses cardiac function. Just some clinical notes to be aware of is that remember that after the primary lesion, everything the body does is defensive in nature. And cardiac distress caused by the psoas diaphragmatic contracture is associated with an L5 disc lesion. And remember, the psoas is not always attached to L5. This disc degeneration releases cardiac distress. Think of this also with athletes who suffer from sudden cardiac arrest during physical activity. Symptoms associated with the psoas diaphragmatic contraction above the diaphragm but below the thoracic apex is tightness of the throat, hoarseness, trouble swallowing, snoring, vagus nerve distraction or irritation, decreased blood flow to the brain, decreased lymphatic drainage, increased stimulation of esophageal contractions, or fatiguing of the vagus nerve. Treatments to stabilize the sacroiliac joints without addressing inflammation or the dysbiosis promoting the degradation and separation of the SI joints will be futile. Treatments must include normalization of gastrointestinal function, restoring NEI suprasystem imbalances, and reducing inflammation to promote connective tissue repair. Thank you for watching Mastering the Gut Module 2, Altered Structure Causes Altered Function. You may now take the quiz.